The barn was supposed to be just another quiet corner of Ezekiel Carter's life, where creaking wood and fields of wheat drowned out the noise of the world. Neighbors saw only an old black farmer, moving slow, his hands hardened by soil and seasons. But trouble doesn't ask permission before stepping onto your land. When black SUVs rolled up the dusty road and masked men poured out, laughter and arrogance dripping from their voices, they thought they'd found an easy mark. What they didn't see in those calm, weathered eyes was a lifetime of battles fought far from home, and the steel of a man who had commanded Marines through hell itself. By the time the cartel realized their mistake, it was already far too late. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The sun hadn't yet touched the horizon when Ezekiel Carter's boots hit the porch boards. 72 years had taught him that the best part of any day came before most folks even thought about waking. His weathered hands wrapped around a steaming mug of black coffee as he surveyed his ranch, the same 40 acres he'd worked for the past 23 years since coming home from his last deployment. The morning ritual never changed. First, check the horses, then the fence line. After that, the equipment shed. Everything had its place, its purpose, its time. Military precision never really left a man, even when the uniform had been folded away for decades. "Morning, ladies," Ezekiel murmured to his three mares, their breath visible in the cool morning air. They nickered softly in response, knowing grain was coming. His movements were economical, practiced. Fill the water troughs, distribute the feed, check for injuries or illness. The kind of systematic approach that had kept men alive in places where most people couldn't find on a map. The barn stood like a sentinel at the property's heart, its red paint faded to rust brown by countless seasons. Inside, hay bales stacked neat as playing cards reached toward the rafters. Old tools hung from pegboards, each outlined in black marker so everything returned to its proper spot. Most folks would see a farmer's workspace. They wouldn't notice the sight lines from the loft windows, or how the doors could be barred from inside, or the reinforced corners that could serve as defensive positions. They wouldn't need to notice. This was Millbrook County, Texas. Nothing happened here except droughts and the occasional tornado warning. "Mr. Carter, Mr. Carter." A teenage voice cut through the morning stillness. Luis Mendez came pedaling up the dirt road on a bike that had seen better days, his backpack bouncing with each bump. The kid was 16, all knees and elbows, with the kind of nervous energy that reminded Ezekiel of young Marines before their first deployment. "Thought I told you to call me Ezekiel," the old man said, not looking up from the fence post he was examining. "My mom says I gotta show respect to my elders," Luis replied, skidding to a stop and dropping his bike in the dust. "Your mom's raising you right then." Ezekiel handed him a pair of work gloves. "Since you're here, might as well make yourself useful. This section needs new wire." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Luis holding the wire taut while Ezekiel hammered in the staples. The boy had been coming around for nearly 2 years now, ever since his father had disappeared one night and never come back. Nobody talked about it, but everybody knew the cartels had been recruiting in the border towns. Sometimes people who said no ended up gone. "You ever think about leaving?" Luis asked suddenly, sweat already beading on his forehead despite the cool morning. "Leaving where?" "Here. This place. Everything." Ezekiel straightened, studying the boy's face. There was something there, a shadow that hadn't been present last week. "What's got you thinking about running?" Luis kicked at a clump of grass, avoiding eye contact. "Nothing. Just asking." "Boy, I've known you long enough to know when you're carrying something heavy. Spit it out." The teenager's shoulders slumped. "They came to my cousin Roberto's house. 3 guys in a black truck. Said he could make more in a month than his dad makes in a year. Said all he had to do was drive packages from point A to point B. No questions asked." "What did Roberto say?" "He wanted to think about it. They said thinking time was a luxury he couldn't afford." Ezekiel set down his hammer, giving Luis his full attention. The boy needed steadiness right now, not panic. "They approach you?" "Not yet. But Roberto says it's just a matter of time. Says they're expanding operations, looking for young drivers who know the back roads." Look at me, son. Ezekiel waited until Luis met his eyes. Nobody's forcing you to do anything. You understand? Nobody. You don't know these people, Mr. Carter. They don't take no for an answer. A memory flickered across Ezekiel's mind. Another young man, barely 18, shaking in a foxhole while mortars fell like rain. That boy had been certain he was going to die. Ezekiel had put a steady hand on his shoulder then, just as he did with Luis now. I know more about dangerous men than you might think, Ezekiel said quietly. You get any visits, any pressure, you come straight to me. Don't try to handle it alone. Luis nodded, some of the tension leaving his face. They returned to the fence work, but Ezekiel's mind was already running tactical assessments. If the cartels were recruiting local kids, they were establishing a foothold. That meant logistics networks, safe houses, enforcement teams. The infection was spreading north. After Luis left for school, Ezekiel drove his weathered pickup to Pearson's feed store. The place served as the unofficial intelligence hub for the county. If something was happening, Earl Pearson knew about it. The bell above the door announced his arrival, and several heads turned his way. Conversations seemed to pause mid-sentence before resuming at lower volumes. Ezekiel, Earl called out from behind the counter, his usual broad smile slightly strained. What can I do you for? Need another salt block and some fence staples, Ezekiel replied, but his eyes were reading the room. Tom Morrison from the next ranch over was huddled with his foreman near the fertilizer section, speaking in urgent whispers. Mary Patterson, who ran the grocery store, clutched her purse tighter when the door opened behind him. Coming right up, Earl disappeared into the back, and Ezekiel moseyed over to the community bulletin board, pretending to read the notices while his ears tuned to the fragments of conversation around him. Found another one of those packages in the ditch out on Highway 47. Black SUV's been cruising through downtown after midnight. Sheriff says he can't do nothing without evidence. Earl returned with the supplies, his voice lowered as he rang up the purchase. Ezekiel, you heard about the Walker's place? No, what about it? Abandoned. Just up and left everything. House, cattle, everything. Found their truck at the bus station in San Antonio. When? 3 nights ago. Same night, those boys showed up at the Riverside bar, flashing money and asking questions about who owned what land around here. Ezekiel paid in cash, tucking the receipt in his shirt pocket. Anybody else thinking about leaving? More than thinking. The Hendersons are already packing. Earl leaned closer. Ezekiel, I know you were in the military and all, but these aren't the kind of men you stand up to. These are the kind you run from. Sometimes running just means you die tired, Earl. The drive home took him past the Riverside bar, where 2 black SUVs sat in the parking lot despite it being barely noon. Ezekiel memorized the license plates out of habit, his mind automatically cataloging details. Nuevo León Platz. Tinted windows beyond legal limits. Extended mirrors indicating armor plating. High-performance tires rated for pursuit speeds. Back at the ranch, he went through his afternoon routine, but his movements had shifted. Instead of just checking equipment, he was checking fields of fire. Instead of organizing tools, he was mentally cataloging what could serve as weapons. The change was subtle, probably invisible to anyone watching, but Ezekiel could feel old instincts awakening. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, he sat on his porch, cleaning his grandfather's Winchester rifle. It was perfectly legal, of course. Just an old farmer maintaining his varmint gun. The fact that he could still put 5 rounds in a playing card at 300 yards was nobody's business but his own. That's when he saw it. A black SUV creeping along the county road, slowing as it passed his property line. The windows were too dark to see inside, but Ezekiel could feel eyes on him. The vehicle stopped for a full 30 seconds, engine idling, before continuing north toward town. He finished cleaning the rifle without rushing, then went inside and locked the door. In his bedroom, behind a false panel he'd installed years ago, was a drawer most people would never find. Inside lay his Navy Cross, his Purple Heart, and the gold oak leaves of a Marine lieutenant colonel. Beside them, wrapped in oilcloth, was a Colt 1911 that had seen him through 3 wars and countless operations that never made the newspapers. His fingers traced the etching on the grip. 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. The Fighting Fifth. His boys. Most of them were gone now, claimed by age or cancer or their own demons. But the lessons remained. The training remained. The instinct to protect remained. A photograph tucked beneath the medals showed a younger Ezekiel surrounded by grinning Marines, their faces dusty and exhausted, but alive with the fierce joy of survival. He remembered each of their names, their hometowns, their dreams. Martinez from East LA, who wanted to be a teacher. Johnson from Detroit, who sent half his pay to his grandmother. Washington from rural Georgia, who could make anybody laugh even in the middle of hell. They'd called him commander, later just boss, when the ranks didn't matter anymore and only trust kept them alive. He brought most of them home. Most, but not all. The faces of the ones he'd lost still visited him at night sometimes. Ezekiel closed the drawer and moved to the kitchen window. The SUV had returned, parked across from his ranch entrance. Just sitting there, watching, waiting. He made himself a simple dinner and ate it slowly, showing no concern for the surveillance. Let them watch. Let them think he was just another old rancher, stubborn but harmless. Sun Tzu had written about appearing weak when you were strong. Ezekiel had learned that lesson in rice paddies and desert towns, in mountain passes and urban mazes. The next morning arrived with an unseasonal chill, and Rafael Morales stood on a hill overlooking Carter Ranch, binoculars pressed to his eyes. At 35, he commanded respect through fear rather than loyalty. His rise through the cartel ranks marked by calculated violence and an accountant's attention to detail. Tell me again what Valdez said. Rafael ordered, lowering the binoculars. His lieutenant, a nervous man named Nico, shifted his weight. He said his sources confirmed it. The old farmer is sitting on a fortune in cash and product. Said the previous owner was moving weight for the Reynosa faction before he died. Left everything hidden in that barn. Rafael studied the property layout, his mind running cost-benefit calculations. One old man. Isolated location. Local law enforcement stretched thin and corrupted enough to look the other way. It should be a simple smash and grab. Take whatever was hidden, eliminate the witness, torch the place to send a message. How reliable is this source? Valdez vouches for him personally. That gave Rafael pause. Valdez was ambitious, always angling for advantage. But the potential reward outweighed the risk. If there really was Reynosa money hidden down there, it would fund their expansion for months. Send Cruz and Ortega to scout it properly. I want to know everything. Daily routines, visitors, weapons, dogs, everything. Meanwhile, Ezekiel had already spotted the surveillance team. They were good, but not great, maintaining concealment from casual observation, but making amateur mistakes. Cigarette butts left where they shouldn't be. The same car passing by too many times. Footprints in the soft earth near his property line where nobody had any business walking. He went about his routines, careful to appear oblivious while memorizing every detail. 2 observers working in shifts. Young, probably early 20s. Nervous energy suggested they were new to this kind of work. They stayed on the ridgeline mostly, using binoculars and possibly a spotting scope. On the 3rd day of surveillance, Ezekiel made a decision. He pulled out his cell phone, one of those fancy smartphones his daughter had insisted he get, and scrolled to Angela's number. The phone rang 4 times before she picked up. "Dad, this is unexpected. Is everything okay?" Angela's voice carried that professional clip she'd developed since becoming a prosecutor in Dallas. Always efficient, always slightly guarded, like she was perpetually deposing a witness. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just wanted to hear your voice." There was a pause. "Dad, you never called just to chat. What's wrong?" Ezekiel smiled, despite himself. She'd inherited his instinct for detecting trouble. Can an old man miss his daughter? An old man can. You specifically cannot. Not without reason. I was thinking maybe you should postpone that visit you mentioned. The one for next weekend. What visit? I haven't planned any. Her voice sharpened. "Dad, what's going on?" "Nothing to worry about. Just some local troubles. Kids acting up, making problems for folks. Better you stay in the city until it blows over." Local troubles, right? Do these troubles have anything to do with those cartel warnings the DEA sent out last month? Sometimes Ezekiel forgot his daughter had access to law enforcement bulletins. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, not a good time for visiting. I could contact the Dallas field office, have them... No, the word came out harder than intended. No federal involvement. That would just make things worse for everybody. Dad, if you're in danger, I'm not in danger. I'm being cautious. There's a difference. Angela sighed, and he could picture her rubbing her temples the way she did when frustrated. You always do this. Push everyone away when things get complicated. That's not what I'm doing, isn't it? Just like when Mom was dying. Just like after the funeral. You handle everything alone because God forbid anyone see you need help. The words stung because they held truth. After Martha's death from cancer 12 years ago, he'd retreated into the ranch, into routine, into solitude. It had been easier than facing the empty spaces she'd left behind. This is different, he said quietly. Different how? Because this time, I'm not protecting myself. I'm protecting you. The silence stretched between them, filled with years of unspoken grievances and misunderstood intentions. Fine, Angela finally said, but I'm checking in every day. And if I don't hear from you, I'm calling everyone from the local sheriff to the FBI. Understood. Understood. After hanging up, Ezekiel sat in his kitchen for a long moment. The photograph on the wall showed Angela at her law school graduation, Martha beside her, both beaming with pride. He'd been in Afghanistan then, missing another milestone for another mission. The pattern of his life laid out in absent moments. A knock at the door interrupted his brooding. Louise stood on the porch, backpack slung over one shoulder, dirt bike leaning against the steps. Shouldn't you be in school? Half day. Teacher's meeting or something. The boy's eyes darted nervously toward the road. Mr. Carter, I saw something. Ezekiel stepped aside, letting him in. Tell me, those men in the black trucks. They were at the school today, talking to Roberto and some other kids by the basketball courts. What did you hear? They're looking for storage locations, places to keep packages between runs. They asked about empty barns, abandoned houses, places nobody checks regular. The pieces clicked together in Ezekiel's mind. They thought his barn was a stash house. Either someone had bad intelligence, or this was a fishing expedition that would turn violent when they found nothing. Did they mention my place specifically? No, but Luis Hesetatif. Roberto pointed this direction when they asked about isolated properties. I'm sorry, Mr. Carter. He's scared. They all are. Nothing to apologize for, son. Fear makes people do unfortunate things. That evening, Ezekiel began his preparations in earnest. He moved his truck to a different spot, one that provided better cover if he needed to reach it quickly. He tested the barn doors, oiling hinges that might squeak at the wrong moment. In a loft, he positioned hay bales to create natural firing positions with overlapping fields of coverage. His military mind automatically ran through the tactical assessment. The barn had good bones, solid construction with multiple exits, and excellent vertical space. The main weakness was illumination. They'd probably hit at night, using darkness as cover. He'd need to control the lighting, turn their advantage into a liability. In his workshop, he rigged simple alarms using fishing line and cowbells, the kind of early warning system that looked accidental but would give him precious seconds of notice. He checked his ammunition supply, plenty for the Winchester and the Colt, plus a tactical shotgun he kept for coyote problems. As darkness fell, he made one more phone call. Sheriff Tom Daniels had served with Ezekiel's nephew in Iraq, earning a Bronze Star before coming home to small-town law enforcement. Tom, it's Ezekiel Carter. Mr. Carter, good to hear from you. Everything all right out your way? Might have some trouble coming. Thought you should know. There was a pause. What kind of trouble? The kind that drives black SUVs and doesn't pay taxes. Shit. Another pause. Mr. Carter, I gotta tell you something, and I need you to keep it between us. Half my department is on their payroll. I try to make an official response to anything at your place. I'll know about it before I even start the engine. I'm not asking you to come charging in, Tom. Just wanted you aware in case things get noisy. How noisy we talking? Depends on how stupid they are. Mr. Carter, these aren't the kind of people you can face down alone. They've got automatic weapons, military training, zero conscience about killing. Ezekiel almost laughed. If only the sheriff knew the things he'd faced down in his life. The ambush at Fallujah, where his squad held off 200 insurgents for 6 hours. The extraction from Somalia that nobody talked about. The classified operations in places that didn't officially exist. I appreciate the concern, Tom. Just keep your good deputies ready in case you get a call about a fire or something similar. After hanging up, Ezekiel walked through his house one more time, memorizing positions, angles, distances. Muscle memory from urban warfare training took over. Every doorway was a fatal funnel. Every window was both an observation point and a vulnerability. Every piece of furniture could be cover or concealment. He paused at his bedroom, looking at the false panel hiding his military past. Tomorrow he'd retrieve more than just the pistol. There was other equipment there, things he'd kept just in case. Night vision from his last deployment. Body armor that still fit despite his age. A combat knife that had saved his life more than once. Outside, coyotes howled in the distance, their calls echoing across the empty land. But Ezekiel heard something else in the wind. The distant sound of engines idling. Multiple vehicles try to run quiet but not quite managing it. He loaded the Winchester, working the action once to chamber a round. The sound was deliberately loud, carrying in the still night air. Let them hear it. Let them know the old farmer wasn't sleeping. In the shadows beyond his fence line, Rafael Morales lowered his night vision goggles and smiled. The old fool just told us he's armed. Makes this self-defense when we kill him. Should we move tonight? Nico asked. No, let him sweat. Let him lose sleep wondering when we're coming. Exhausted prey makes mistakes. But back in his kitchen, Ezekiel wasn't sweating. He was cleaning his weapons with the methodical precision of a man who'd done this countless times before. Each piece stripped, cleaned, oiled, reassembled. The movements were meditation, calming his mind and steadying his hands. On the wall, Martha's picture watched over him. Here we go again, darling, he murmured. One more mission, one more fight, then maybe I can rest. The sound that answered him wasn't Martha's voice, but the metallic click of a rifle bolt being tested somewhere in the darkness. Ezekiel smiled grimly. They thought they were hunting him. They had no idea they were walking into a trap 20 years in the making. The midnight hour brought no peace to Carter Ranch. Ezekiel sat in the darkness of his barn's loft, Winchester across his lap, listening to the symphony of night sounds that weren't quite natural. The crickets had stopped chirping 10 minutes ago. That meant movement, multiple bodies trying to navigate through tall grass. Below him, a single kerosene lantern cast dancing shadows across the barn floor, its weak light deliberately positioned to create dark zones in the corners and along the walls. He'd spread loose hay across the floorboards earlier, the kind that would crunch under boots and give away positions. Simple tricks, but effective. Luis Mendez couldn't sleep either. The boy sat at his bedroom window 2 miles away, using his father's old binoculars to watch the Carter property. He'd told his mother he was feeling sick, needed fresh air, but really he was worried about Mr. Carter. The old man had been more of a father to him these past 2 years than his actual dad had ever been. Through the binoculars, Luis saw shapes moving through the fields. For maybe 5 figures spreading out in what looked like a tactical formation. His heart hammered as he realized what was happening. They were really going to do it. They were going to hurt Mr. Carter. He grabbed his bike, trying to keep quiet as he wheeled it past his mother's room. She worked double shifts at the hospital and needed her sleep. The back door opened without a sound, and then Luis was pedaling hard through the darkness, taking the dirt path that cut through the Morrison property. He had to warn Mr. Carter. Had to help somehow. Back at the barn, Ezekiel tracked the approaching team through sound alone. 5 men, just as the surveillance had suggested. They were maintaining decent spacing, about 10 feet apart, but their approach was too direct. No scouts sent ahead, no flanking elements. They expected this to be easy. The barn door exploded inward with a crash that sent the few chickens roosting in the rafters into a panic. Men with AK-47s rushed in, weapons raised, screaming commands in Spanish and broken English. Down! Get down. Where is it? They found an empty barn floor and a dimly lit lantern swaying on its hook. No old farmer. No resistance. Just shadows and silence. Check the loft. Raphael's voice carried from outside. He was hanging back, letting his men take the risks. Smart, but not smart enough. Two men started toward the ladder, and that's when Ezekiel made his presence known. Not with gunfire, but with gravity. The rope he'd been holding released, and 50 pounds of chain farming equipment crashed down from the rafters, missing the lead man by inches but sending both scrambling backward. Jesus Christ! In the confusion, Ezekiel moved. Not down, but across, using the rafters like he'd once used jungle canopy in Vietnam. The men below fired upward, wild bursts that sent splinters raining down but hit nothing important. Their muzzle flashes destroyed their night vision, turning them into perfect targets. The first man never saw the salt block that knocked him cold. Ezekiel had rigged it on a pendulum, and physics did the rest. The second man spun toward the sound of his colleague falling, only to step backward into the grain pit Ezekiel had uncovered earlier. The loose corn swallowed him to his waist, rifle pointing uselessly at the ceiling. "The old bastard's got the place rigged," someone shouted. More automatic fire erupted, tearing through the old wood, but Ezekiel was already moving. He dropped through a gap in the loft floor he'd prepared, landing in one of those dark corners the lantern couldn't reach. The Winchester came up smooth and steady. The shot was purposeful, precise. Not a kill shot, but a disabling one, taking out the knee of the man closest to the door. The scream that followed was genuine and terrible. Ezekiel needed them scared, not dead. Dead men became martyrs. Wounded men became warnings. Fall back. Fall back. But the barn doors had somehow closed behind them. In the chaos, nobody had noticed the simple rope and pulley system that had pulled them shut. Now they pressed against the exits, panicking as another piece of farm equipment crashed down from above. One of the younger gunmen, barely out of his teens, fired wildly at the shadows. His burst caught a hay bale, and a spark from a ricochet found dry straw. Within seconds, orange flames began licking up the wall. Fire! The place is burning. The smoke spread fast, fed by decades of dust and dry wood. Ezekiel pulled the bandana from his pocket, covered his nose and mouth, and kept moving. He knew every board, every beam, every possible route through this space. They didn't. Through the smoke, he saw one figure trying to help the man stuck in the grain pit. Ezekiel could have shot him easily, but chose not to. Instead, he moved past like a ghost, using the smoke as cover to reach the side door. Luis arrived, just as the flames became visible through the gaps in the barn walls. He dropped his bike in horror, watching orange light dance inside the structure. Without thinking, he ran toward it, screaming Mr. Carter's name. Ezekiel emerged from the side door like something out of a nightmare, covered in soot, Winchester in one hand, dragging an unconscious cartel member with the other. He dropped the man in the dirt and immediately grabbed Luis, pulling him behind the water trough. "What the hell are you doing here, boy? I saw them coming. I wanted to help. Help by staying alive and staying back." Inside the barn, the remaining cartel members had finally managed to force open the main doors. They stumbled out, coughing, supporting their wounded. One still struggled to free himself from the grain pit while flames crept closer. Ezekiel made a decision that went against every tactical instinct. He handed Luis the Winchester and ran back toward the burning barn. The man in the grain pit was young, maybe 20, terror written across his face as he watched death approaching in the form of falling, flaming debris. Ezekiel grabbed a rope, tossed one end to the trapped man. "Pull yourself out. Now!" Together, they managed to extract him just as a burning beam crashed down where he'd been stuck. The young man stumbled out, looked at Ezekiel with confusion and something like awe, then ran toward his colleagues. From the tree line, Rafael Morales watched his operation fall apart. The old farmer had turned his simple raid into a disaster. 2 men wounded, 1 unconscious, all of them traumatized and disorganized. And the barn was burning, destroying any evidence of what might have been hidden there. But Raphael had seen something else. He'd seen the old man move through smoke and chaos with the fluid precision of a professional soldier. This wasn't some lucky farmer with a few tricks. This was something else entirely. Who the hell is he? Raphael asked nobody in particular. Nico appeared at his shoulder, face pale in the firelight. Boss, we need to go. That fire's going to bring attention. Not yet. Raphael raised his binoculars, studying Ezekiel as the old man helped Luis drag a hose toward the burning structure. I want to know who we're really dealing with. Dawn came with Angela Carter's BMW kicking up dust as it roared down the ranch road. She hadn't slept after seeing the news report about a barn fire in Millbrook County. Her father hadn't answered his phone, and that was enough to send her racing south from Dallas before the sun was even up. She found Ezekiel sitting on his porch, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. Behind him, the skeletal remains of the barn still smoldered, black timbers reaching toward the sky like accusatory fingers. "You son of a bitch," Angela said as she slammed her car door. "You couldn't even call to say you were alive? Morning to you too, sweetheart. Don't you sweetheart me." She stormed up the steps, her courtroom presence in full force despite wearing jeans and a hastily grabbed Dallas Cowboys sweatshirt. "Your barn burns down, there are bullet holes in everything, and you're sitting here like it's just another Tuesday?" "It is Tuesday, isn't it, Dad?" Ezekiel set down his coffee and really looked at his daughter for the first time. She had her mother's eyes, that same fierce protectiveness that could flip from love to fury in a heartbeat. Martha would have been proud of the woman she'd become, even if that woman was currently contemplating patricide. "I'm fine, Angela. Everything's under control." "Under control?" She gestured at the destroyed barn. "This is your definition of control? Nobody died. That's control." Sheriff Tom Daniels chose that moment to pull up, his cruiser followed by two other vehicles. The sheriff himself looked tired, like he'd been up all night managing the aftermath. His deputies stayed in their cars, and Ezekiel noticed Tom watching them as carefully as he watched the ranch. "Mr. Carter," the sheriff nodded. "Ms. Carter, didn't expect to see you here. Apparently, I'm the only one surprised by midnight gunfights and arson," Angela replied, her prosecutor instincts engaged. "I assume you're here to take a statement? Collect evidence? Make arrests?" Tom shifted uncomfortably. "Well, the thing is, nobody's filed a complaint. Far as we can tell, this was an accidental fire. Probably old wiring in the barn." "Old wiring," Angela repeated flatly. "That's fascinating, considering I can see at least 15 bullet holes from here. Could be from varmint hunting. Lots of folks shoot around their property." Angela turned to her father. "Are you going to let him get away with this bullshit?" Ezekiel stood slowly, his movements deliberate. "Tom's doing what he can with what he's got. No point making his job harder." "His job? His job is to—" "Angela." The command in Ezekiel's voice stopped her cold. It was the tone he'd rarely used when she was young, the one that meant the discussion was over. "Sheriff, I appreciate you coming out. We'll handle the cleanup ourselves." Tom nodded, relief visible on his face. But as he turned to leave, he made eye contact with Ezekiel and mouthed silently, "Be careful." After the sheriff's convoy left, Angela followed her father into the house. She stopped short when she saw the dining table covered in ammunition boxes, maps, and what looked suspiciously like military equipment. "Dad, what is all this?" "Insurance. Insurance." She picked up a night vision monocular. "This is military grade. Where did you even—" Her eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You kept it. All of it. From your service. Some things you don't throw away." Angela sank into a chair, really seeing her father for perhaps the first time. Not the distant parent who'd missed recitals and birthdays, but the warrior who'd been fighting battles she'd never known about. "Tell me everything," she said quietly. "And don't you dare say it's nothing." So Ezekiel told her. The surveillance, the raid, the fire. He kept his tone matter-of-fact, like he was briefing a superior officer. Angela listened without interrupting, her legal mind cataloging crimes and building cases. "We need to contact the DEA," she said when he finished. "FBI. Someone." "No. Dad, these people try to kill you." "No, they try to rob me." The killing would have been incidental. He sat across from her, his weathered hands folded on the table. "You bring in the feds, this becomes a war. Right now, it's a skirmish. A skirmish that burned down your barn. Barns can be rebuilt. Dead kids can't be brought back. What kids? Every boy they've recruited from town. Every teenager they're using as mules and lookouts. You bring federal heat, the cartel will clean house. Those kids will disappear. Angela wanted to argue, but she'd prosecuted enough organized crime cases to know he was right. When the feds came knocking, witnesses vanished. A knock at the door interrupted them. Luis stood on the porch, his mother Maria beside him. She was still wearing her hospital scrubs, having come straight from her shift. "Mr. Carter," Maria began in accented English. "Luis told me what he did last night. Sneaking out, coming here during—" She gestured helplessly at the burnt barn. "I'm so sorry. Nothing to apologize for, ma'am. Boy was trying to help. That's not his job. It's dangerous. And he's just a child." "Mom, im sixten, Luis protesta." "A child," Maria repeated firmly. She turned back to Ezekiel. "We're leaving. Today. My sister lives in Houston. We'll stay with her until this blows over." "That's probably wise," Ezekiel agreed, though he could see the devastation on Luis's face. "I don't want to go," the boy said. "This is our home. Dad would never have run." Maria's face crumpled slightly at the mention of her missing husband. "Your father made his choices. I'm making mine. We leave in 2 hours." After they left, Angela found her father in his workshop, examining the burnt timbers he'd salvaged from a barn. "You're going to rebuild," she observed. "Eventually, they'll come back. I'm counting on it." She stared at him. "You want them to come back?" "Dad, that's insane." "No, it's tactical. Right now, they're embarrassed and angry. They'll come back with more men, more guns, less caution. When they do, they'll overcommit. And then what?" Ezekiel picked up a hammer, testing its weight. "Then I'll teach them why Marine commanders retire, but they never really stop being Marines." That afternoon, while Angela made phone calls to her office claiming a family emergency, Ezekiel began transforming his ranch into something else. Every piece of military knowledge he'd accumulated over 30 years of service went into the preparations. He dug shallow trenches near the tree line, not deep enough to be obvious, but enough to provide cover. He strung wire between posts at ankle height, invisible in tall grass. He positioned mirrors at angles that would let him see around corners without exposing himself. Rafael Morales watched it all through binoculars from a hill 2 miles away. His burnt hand was wrapped in bandages, a souvenir from last night's debacle when he'd tried to save face by helping extract his men from the burning barn. "He's fortifying," Nico observed unnecessarily. "He's one old man," Rafael spat. "One old man made us look like amateurs. Maybe we should cut our losses. There are other places to establish." "No." Rafael's voice was ice. "We hit him again. Harder. In daylight where he can't hide in shadows and tricks. The men are spooked, boss. They're saying he's some kind of ghost. A demon. He bleeds like any other man. We just need to make him bleed enough." As the sun reached its zenith, a convoy of 3 pickup trucks rolled down the county road. They didn't bother with subtlety this time. Raphael wanted the old man to see them coming, to feel fear as death approached in broad daylight. Ezekiel saw them, but fear wasn't what he felt. It was something closer to anticipation. He'd spent decades preparing for battles he'd hoped would never come. Now, in his 70s, on his own land, the war had finally found him again. "Dad!" Angela ran out of the house, binoculars in hand. 3 vehicles, at least a dozen men. "Get inside. Lock the doors. Stay away from windows. I'm not hiding while you." "You're not hiding. You're taking a defensive position. There's a shotgun in the hall closet, loaded with buckshot. Anyone comes through that door who isn't me. You empty both barrels at center mass." "Dad, I'm a prosecutor, not a—" "Today you're a survivor. Act like it." The truck stopped at the property line. Men poured out, spreading into a skirmish line. They moved better this time, maintaining cover, watching their sectors. Raphael had learned from the previous night's disaster. Ezekiel took position behind the reinforced chicken coop, the Winchester steady in his hands. He had maybe 40 rounds for the rifle, 2 magazines for the Colt, and 6 shells for the tactical shotgun. Against 12 men with automatic weapons, the math wasn't good. But math had never been in his favor. Not in Fallujah, not in Mogadishu, not in a dozen other places where he'd survived when statistics said he shouldn't. The first shot came from the attacking force, shattering a window in the house. Angela's scream carried across the yard, and Ezekiel had to fight the urge to run to her. That's what they wanted, to draw him out, make him emotional, make him stupid. Instead, he returned fire with methodical precision, not trying for kills, but for effect. A shot that sparked off a truck hood, sending a man diving for cover. Another that shattered a side mirror, causing confusion about the direction of fire. He was buying time, but for what? That's when he heard it. Sirens. Multiple sirens, growing closer. Through the chaos, he saw Luis on his dirt bike, racing down the road away from the ranch. The kid had called it in, probably claimed there was a mass shooting in progress. Smart boy. Even corrupted cops couldn't ignore something that public. Raphael heard the sirens too. His face contorted with rage as he realized the trap. If they stayed, they'd be caught in a public firefight with law enforcement. If they ran, they'd look weak twice in 24 hours. Fall back, he ordered. Move! Move! The attackers retreated to their vehicles, laying down suppressing fire as they went. Ezekiel let them go. This wasn't about killing. It was about surviving, and he'd survived another round. As the trucks disappeared and the sirens grew closer, Angela emerged from the house. Her hands shook as she set down the shotgun she'd been ready to use. Is it over? She asked. Ezekiel watched the dust settle where the vehicles had been. In the distance, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. No, he said quietly. It's just beginning. The convoy that rolled into Millbrook County 3 days after the failed daylight assault was different. No more black SUVs trying to blend in. Rafael Morales had brought an army. 7 trucks, each carrying 4 to 5 men. More vehicles staging at the abandoned Riverside bar. They moved through town like an occupying force, and that's exactly what they were. At Thompson's grocery, Raphael's men questioned everyone who entered. Where did they live? Who did they know? Had they been to the Carter Ranch? Mary Thompson stood behind her counter, hands trembling as she watched armed men intimidate her customers. Please, she told the one who seemed to be in charge, a cold-eyed man named Valdez. We don't want any trouble. Then tell us about the old man. Carter. He's just a farmer. Keeps to himself mostly. Valdez leaned across the counter. A farmer who killed 3 of our men? I don't know anything about that. You know he shops here. You know who visits him. Talk. Mary's eyes darted toward the door, hoping someone, anyone, might intervene. But the few customers present kept their heads down, pretending not to see or hear. His daughter visits sometimes, she whispered. From Dallas. That's all I know. At the sheriff's station, Tom Daniels sat at his desk with a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. His deputy, Carl Morrison, stood in the doorway looking uncomfortable. They're all over town, Sheriff. People are scared. Nothing illegal about being in town. They're carrying weapons, intimidating folks. Tom finally looked up. You want to go arrest 30 cartel members? Be my guest. I'll notify your widow. Carl's face reddened. So we just do nothing. We survive. That's what we do. After Carl left, Tom pulled out his personal cell phone and scrolled to a contact labeled E. Carter. His finger hovered over the call button. He typed out a text instead. They're here in force. 30-plus men. Setting up for something big. Can't help officially. God help you. At the ranch, Ezekiel read the message without expression. He'd been expecting this. The past 3 days had been preparation time, and he'd used every hour. Angela emerged from the root cellar, carrying mason jars filled with water. They'd been stockpiling supplies, turning the main house into a fortress. She'd wanted to leave, to get help, but Ezekiel had convinced her that running would only delay the inevitable. That's the last of the water, she announced. 40 gallons total, plus what's in the pipes. Good. Food. Enough for 2 weeks, if we're careful. We won't need 2 weeks. This will be over in 3 days, one way or another. Angela set down the jars harder than necessary. You keep saying that like you know something I don't. I know men like Raphael. Pride drives them more than profit. He's invested too much to walk away now. He'll throw everything at us. and when that fails, he'll either die trying or his own men will turn on him. And if you're wrong, Ezekiel checked the load on his Winchester. Then we'll make 3 days count. A bicycle bell chiming in the distance made them both freeze. Through the window, they saw Luis Mendez pedaling up the road, a backpack bouncing on his shoulders. "That little fool," Angela muttered. Luis dropped his bike and ran to the porch, where Ezekiel met him with a stern expression. "You're supposed to be in Houston." "I was. For about 10 hours. Then I left. Your mother thinks I'm at school. They enrolled me in my cousin's high school. But I couldn't." Luis's voice cracked slightly. "I couldn't just hide while you faced them alone. This isn't your fight, son." "Yes, it is." The boy's jaw set with determination that seemed beyond his years. "They killed my father. Everyone knows it, even if nobody says it. He stood up to them, and they disappeared him. I won't let them do the same to you." Ezekiel studied the boy's face, seeing something he recognized from too many young Marines. The need for purpose, for meaning, for a chance to fight back against forces that seemed unstoppable. "Your mother will. My mother will understand. Eventually, after this is over." Angela stepped forward. "Luis, this isn't a movie. People are going to die here. People are already dying. Just slower, quieter. Every kid they recruit, every family they threaten, every business they take over. It's all death, just spread out so folks can pretend not to see it." Before anyone could respond, the sound of engines grew louder. Multiple vehicles approaching from different directions. They were surrounding the ranch. Inside, Ezekiel commanded, "Both of you, now." They moved into the house as trucks took positions around the property. Ezekiel counted at least 20 men spreading out, setting up a perimeter. They weren't trying to hide anymore. This was a siege. A loudspeaker crackled to life, Raphael's voice echoing across the fields. "Ezekiel Carter, you have 1 hour to surrender yourself. Come out alone, and no one else needs to be hurt. Your daughter can go free. The boy can go free. This is between you and me." Angela grabbed her father's arm. "You're not actually considering." "Of course not. He'd kill all of us the moment I stepped outside. He's just following the script, offering terms he knows I won't accept so he can claim he tried to be reasonable. So what do we do?" Ezekiel moved to his command position, a reinforced corner of the living room, where he'd set up firing positions covering multiple approaches. "We make them pay for every inch." Night fell like a curtain, and with it came the psychological warfare. Floodlights blazed to life, sweeping across the house and grounds in irregular patterns. The loudspeaker continued its periodic announcements, sometimes Raphael's threats, sometimes music played at ear-splitting volume, sometimes recordings of screams and gunfire designed to fray nerves. Luis covered his ears, trying to block out the sound. "How do we sleep through this?" "We don't," Ezekiel replied calmly. "That's the point. But we can rest in shifts." "Angela, you first." 2 hours. I can't possibly sleep with." "You can, and you will. Exhaustion is the enemy." "Luis, you're after her." "I'll take first watch." As his daughter reluctantly retreated to the back bedroom and Luis curled up on the couch, Ezekiel settled into his position. Through the window, he could see cigarette glows in the darkness, sentries walking their posts. They were good, but not perfect. The one on the east side kept checking his phone, the light destroying his night vision. The Western Guard had a slight limp, probably an old injury that would slow him if things went kinetic. At midnight, the probing began. 3 men approached the northern fence line, wire cutters in hand. Ezekiel let them get close, let them think they were undetected, then put a round into the fence post 6 inches from the lead man's head. The crack of the rifle sent them scrambling back, shouting in Spanish. The floodlights converged on their position, but Ezekiel had already displaced, moving to a different window. "Just checking if you're awake, old man." Raphael's voice boomed through the speaker. "We have all the time in the world." The second night brought wind from the north, strong enough to mask sounds and create moving shadows that played tricks on tired eyes. Ezekiel used it to his advantage, timing his movements with the gusts. When the wind howled, he moved. When it died, he froze. From his position in the loft of the tool shed, he watched 3 Cartel teams advance in a staggered formation. They were learning, adapting to his tactics. But Ezekiel had been adapting to enemy tactics since before these men were born. He didn't aim for bodies. Instead, his suppressed shots, muffled further by the wind, took out radios. One by one, the point men's communications failed. Without radios, their coordination fractured. Teams that should have moved in concert began to drift apart, gaps opening in their lines. Inside the house, Angela had taken command of the interior defense. To her surprise, she found herself falling into the role naturally. Years of managing complex court cases had taught her to juggle multiple priorities under pressure. She established rotation schedules, distributed water, checked their defensive positions. "Luis, check the back door barricade," she ordered. "Make sure nothing's shifted." "Already did, ma'am." "Do it again. And stop calling me ma'am. Makes me feel like my mother." The boy grinned despite their situation and went to recheck the fortifications. Angela watched him go, amazed at his composure. Most kids his age would be paralyzed with fear. Luis seemed to grow calmer as danger increased. The loudspeaker crackled again, but this time it wasn't Raphael's voice. It was Ezekiel's, recorded from old Marine communications, distorted but recognizable. "Eagle 6 to all units. We are taking heavy fire. Request immediate support." "How copy?" Angela froze as she heard her father's younger voice, filled with controlled urgency. Another recording played. "We've got 3 Kia, 5 wounded. We need those medevacs now." She found Ezekiel at his position, his face carved from stone. "Where did they get those?" "Doesn't matter. It's from your service. They're trying to. I know what they're trying to do." His voice was steady, but she saw his knuckles white around the rifle stock. "They want me emotional. Want me thinking about the man I lost instead of the fight in front of me." More recordings played. Commands barked in combat. Calls for help. The sound of explosions and automatic weapons. Angela realized she was hearing the worst moments of her father's military career weaponized against him. "Turn it into strength," Ezekiel said quietly. "Every voice you hear was a Marine who trusted me. I brought most of them home. I'll bring us home too." Outside, Sheriff Daniel sat in his personal truck 2 miles away, using binoculars to watch the siege. He'd officially logged himself as investigating a disturbance on the opposite side of the county. His trusted deputy, Jim Harrison, sat beside him. "We should do something," Jim said. We're witnessing. Someone needs to survive to tell the truth about what happened here. That's not enough." Tom pulled out a burner phone and dialed a number from memory. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." A voice answered. "I need to report a mass hostage situation in Millbrook County, Texas. Armed cartel members have surrounded a ranch. Shots fired. Civilians in danger." He gave the details quickly, then destroyed the phone. It would take time for the feds to mobilize, maybe too much time, but it was all he could do without getting his own men killed. Back at the ranch, Luis made a discovery that changed everything. While checking the exterior wall, he noticed fresh dirt that shouldn't be there. Following the disturbance, he found a line of buried containers that smelled like diesel. "Mr. Carter," he whispered urgently, "they're planning to burn us out. They've set up fuel lines around the whole property." Ezekiel examined the boy's discovery, his mind racing through possibilities. "Good catch, son. How do you feel about some creative plumbing?" Together, they worked to redirect the fuel lines, careful not to trigger any detection devices. Instead of surrounding the house, the diesel would flow toward the stock pond. It was dangerous, delicate work, made harder by the need for absolute silence. A commotion at the western perimeter drew their attention. Cartel sappers were approaching the windmill that supplied the ranch's water. If they destroyed it, the siege would become a countdown to dehydration. "Angela," Ezekiel whispered into his radio. "Western approach. 3 targets. You have the angle from the bathroom window." Angela moved into position, her hands steady despite her racing heart. She'd never fired at a human being before, never even imagined she would. But these men were trying to kill her father, kill Luis, kill her. The legal niceties of her courtroom seemed very far away. She sighted through the scope Ezekiel had taught her to use over the past 3 days. The crosshairs settled on a man's boot. A warning shot, her father had said. Make them think twice. She squeezed the trigger. The round sparked off a rock inches from the sapper's foot, sending him jumping backward. His companions scattered, assuming they were under accurate fire. The windmill remained intact. Good shot. Ezekiel's voice came through the radio. Displaced now. She moved to a different position just as return fire shattered the bathroom window. Her heart hammered, but there was also something else. A fierce satisfaction that she'd defended something that mattered. From his command position, Raphael watched his men's repeated failures with growing fury. Every probe was repelled. Every advantage was neutralized. The old man seemed to be everywhere at once. His lieutenant Nico approached carefully. Raphael had already struck 2 men for bringing bad news. Boss, there's something you should know. That tip about the contraband in the barn? I've been thinking and... What about it? Valdez was the one who brought it to us. Said his source was solid. But what if there never was any contraband? What if this whole thing was a setup? Raphael turned slowly, his eyes dangerous. Are you saying Valdez played me? I'm saying maybe we should verify before we lose more men. The doubt was planted. Raphael looked toward where Valdez commanded the southern perimeter. The man had been suspiciously eager to volunteer for that position, away from the main assault routes. And hadn't he been the one counseling caution after each failed attack? As dawn approached, ending the second night of the siege, Ezekiel climbed to the roof. The wind had died, leaving an eerie stillness. He could see the entire perimeter now, count every enemy position. They were tired, frustrated, starting to doubt. He keyed his radio on an open channel he knew they monitored. Rafael Morales, this ends today. Your men are exhausted. Your intel was false. There's no contraband here. Never was. Someone fed you a lie to get you killed. Think about who benefits from your death. There was no response, but Ezekiel saw movement in the enemy positions. Men turning to look at each other. Whispered conversations. The seed of doubt growing into suspicion. The third night would bring the crisis. Ezekiel could feel it building like a storm. Either Raphael would throw everything into a final assault, or his own men would turn on him. Either way, the siege was approaching its climax. He climbed down to find Angela and Luis preparing breakfast with their dwindling supplies. They looked exhausted but unbroken. His daughter had a hardness in her eyes now, the kind that came from crossing lines you never expected to cross. Luis had lost the last of his childhood innocence, replaced by the steady resolve of someone who'd chosen their stand. Tonight, they'll come with everything, Ezekiel told them. No more probes, no more games. When they do, I need you both to be ready for things to get very bad very fast. We're ready, Angela said, checking the load on her shotgun. Luis nodded, his young face set with determination. We finish this tonight. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, nature itself seeming to sense the coming violence. Lightning flickered in the distance, and the air grew heavy with the promise of rain. In the cartel perimeter, Raphael stood before his assembled men. Some looked eager for the final assault. Others seemed uncertain, especially after the old man's broadcast about false intelligence. Tonight, we end this, Raphael announced. Full assault. No mercy. No hesitation. Anyone who refuses to advance will be shot as a traitor. Valdez stood at the back of the group, his hand resting on his pistol. His own calculations were running. If Raphael died in the assault, he could claim leadership. If the old man was telling the truth about the false intel, he could blame everything on Raphael's poor judgment. As the sun set on the third day, all parties prepared for the violence to come. The siege of Carter Ranch was about to reach its bloody conclusion. Dawn arrived with a deceptive calm. No wind, no movement, just the gray light spreading across the ranch like water filling a basin. Ezekiel stood at the kitchen window, counting muzzle flashes from the tree line. They weren't trying to hit anything, just testing responses, mapping defensive positions. They're using blanks on the farmhouse windows, he told Angela, trying to make us waste ammunition on ghosts. Before she could respond, the real attack began. Not from the obvious approaches, but from below. The floor in the mudroom erupted as men burst through from the collapsed root cellar on the barn's north side. They'd been tunneling through the night, using the psychological warfare as cover for the digging sounds. "Contact north," Ezekiel barked, pivoting with the Winchester. The first man through took a load of buckshot center mass, his body armor absorbing most of it, but the impact sending him tumbling back into his companions. The narrow tunnel entrance became a fatal funnel. Ezekiel's training kicked in, muscle memory from 100 close-quarters battles. "Luis, left corner. Angela, watch R6. Luis dropped behind the overturned kitchen table, firing controlled bursts with a pistol Ezekiel had given him. His shots weren't aimed to kill, but to suppress, to keep heads down while Ezekiel worked. The old Marine moved with fluid efficiency, each motion economical and purposeful. Step right, fire, displace. Create angles, exploit confusion. Use the house's layout against the invaders. The living room became a killing field of crossfire and calculated violence. "Grenade!" Angela screamed. The flashbang rolled across the floor. Ezekiel kicked it back toward the tunnel entrance as he shielded Luis with his body. The explosion sent white light and thunder through the confined space, but most of its force went back into the tunnel. Screams echoed from below as the breach team retreated, dragging wounded. But Ezekiel knew this was just the beginning. The tunnel had to be sealed. "The beam," he pointed to a support post he'd weakened days ago. "Luis, help me." Together they kicked out the support. The ceiling groaned, then collapsed in a cascade of timber and 100-year-old adobe. Dust filled the air as tons of material sealed the tunnel. Anyone still inside was either dead or buried. Through the chaos, they heard Raphael on the loudspeaker. "Impressive, old man. But we're just getting started." A thermite charge detonated against the western wall, white-hot metal eating through wood and plaster. Smoke billowed as flames caught the dry timber. Another fire, but this time they couldn't abandon the structure. "Angela, the extinguishers." She ran for them while Ezekiel made a terrible choice. Hold a defensive position or save the house. Military doctrine said hold. But this wasn't just a position. This was his home, Martha's home, the place where Angela had taken her first steps. He released the livestock from the attached stable, driving them out through the smoke. Confused horses and cattle scattered across the property, inadvertently providing moving cover in chaos that disrupted the cartel sightlines. A figure emerged from the smoke. Luis, who'd been covering the southern approach, found himself face to face with a cartel soldier. The man raised his rifle, and time seemed to slow. Luis saw his father's face in his mind, remembered the last words they'd shared before he disappeared. "Be brave, but be smart." Instead of firing, Luis dove right, rolling behind the feed bins. The soldier's burst tracked him, splintering wood. Luis came up firing, his shots wild, but enough to drive the man back into the smoke. "The boy!" Raphael's voice cut through the chaos. "Get the boy alive. He's our leverage." 3 men converged on Luis's position. He tried to retreat, but they had him boxed. One grabbed him from behind, wrestling the pistol away. Luis fought with everything he had, but he was 16 facing grown men. "Got him," someone shouted. Ezekiel heard the call and felt something cold settle in his chest. They had Luis. Everything changed now. He started toward the sound, but Angela grabbed his arm. "It's what they want. You charge and you die, we all die." She was right, but knowing it didn't make it easier. Through the window, they could see men dragging Luis toward a pickup truck. The boy was fighting, kicking, refusing to make it easy. The radio crackled. Raphael's voice, calm and satisfied. "Well, Commander Carter, seems we have something you want, and you have something I want. Shall we discuss terms?" "Don't hurt the boy," Ezekiel said into the radio, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. "That depends entirely on you. You have 1 hour to surrender yourself. You come out, the boy goes free. Simple exchange. And my daughter? She can leave. This is between warriors, yes? Your life for theirs." Ezekiel looked at Angela. She shook her head violently. "No, absolutely not. We'll find another way." But Ezekiel was already thinking ahead. Raphael would never honor the deal. The moment Ezekiel surrendered, they'd kill all three of them. But maybe there was another option. Sheriff Daniels had been monitoring the situation from his hiding spot when he saw Luis get captured. Something broke inside him. He'd been a coward, hiding behind jurisdiction and survival. But watching a kid get taken, a good kid who'd only wanted to help, that was too much. He turned to Deputy Harrison. "Jim, I'm going in." "Sheriff, that's suicide." "Maybe, but I've got something they don't know about." There's an old EMS volunteer, Patricia Williams. She's also a Vietnam vet, combat medic with the 1st Infantry. Lives about 3 miles from here. Go get her, tell her to bring her kit, and whatever else she thinks might help. What are you going to do? What I should have done from the start. My job. Tom drove toward the ranch, but not directly. He took the old service road that ran along the Easter property line. As he drove, he made another call on his radio, this time on an open channel. "This is Sheriff Daniels to all units. We have a kidnapping in progress at Carter Ranch. 16-year-old Latino male taken hostage by armed suspects. All available units respond immediately." He knew most of his deputies wouldn't come, but some would. The ones who still remembered why they'd put on the badge in the first place. Back at the ranch, Angela was working on her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. "I've been recording everything," she told her father. "Audio, some video from my phone. I'm uploading it all to multiple cloud servers, scheduling automatic releases to news outlets and law enforcement agencies. Smart. If they kill us, the whole world will know what happened here. But I'd rather not be martyrs." Ezekiel was studying the cartel positions through binoculars when he noticed something. Valdez and his men had pulled back from the southern perimeter. They were clustering near their vehicles, engaged in what looked like an argument with Raphael's loyalists. "They're fracturing," he said quietly. The radio crackled again, but this time it was a different voice. Nico, Raphael's lieutenant, speaking on a side channel. "Mr. Carter, we need to talk. Not all of us want this. The boy, the violence, it's gone too far. Then let him go. It's not that simple. Raphael has him under guard at the old cannery by the river. But there might be another way." Angela grabbed the radio. "This is Angela Carter. I'm a prosecutor with the Dallas DA's office. You help us, I can guarantee you consideration. Witness protection if you provide testimony." There was a long pause. Raphael's losing it. Half the men think this whole thing was a setup. Valdez is telling people there never was any contraband, that someone wanted Raphael dead and used you as the weapon. Ezekiel and Angela exchanged glances. The fracture was becoming a break. "Where exactly is Luis being held?" Ezekiel asked. "The old Riverside Cannery. Northwest corner, 2nd floor. 6 guards, but 2 of them are mine. If you move at the shift change, just after dark, you might have a window." "Why should we trust you?" "Because in about 10 minutes, Valdez is going to make his move against Raphael. When that happens, everything goes to hell. Get the boy during the chaos." The cannery loomed against the darkening sky like a rusted monument to better times. Ezekiel approached from the river, swimming through the cold black water of a drainage culvert that ran beneath the structure. Every stroke sent pain through his 72-year-old shoulders, but pain was just information, and he'd learned to file it away decades ago. He surfaced beneath a corroded grate, listening to the sounds above. Footsteps on metal, voices in Spanish, the distant hum of a generator. He pulled himself up, water streaming off his dark clothing, and checked his equipment. The Colt had been wrapped in plastic, the knife secured against his leg. Simple tools for a complex problem. Angela waited at the ranch with a radio, coordinating their 2-pronged plan. She'd activated every recording device she could find, streaming everything live to secure servers. If this went wrong, at least there would be evidence. In position, Ezekiel whispered into his throat mic. "Copy. Sheriff Daniels is creating a distraction at the main gate in 5 minutes." Ezekiel moved through the cannery's bowels, marking his path with chalk arrows on the walls. Old habits from tunnel operations in Vietnam. Always know your way out, especially in the dark. He encountered the first guard near the maintenance stairs, a young man more interested in his phone than his surroundings. The takedown was swift and silent. A blood choke that put the guard unconscious in seconds, his body lowered carefully to avoid noise. Ezekiel took his keys and radio, listening to the chatter. Most of it was routine, but there was tension in the voices. Fear. On the second floor, he could hear Luis's voice through a door, talking to someone. The boy sounded scared but defiant, still fighting with words if not fists. My friends know where I am. If something happens to me, they'll tell everyone. Shut up, kid. Nobody's coming for you. Ezekiel smiled grimly. They were wrong about that. He positioned himself and knocked on the door in a specific pattern, one he'd heard the guards use. It opened partially, and he struck hard and fast. The guard dropped, clutching his throat, unable to cry out. Ezekiel pushed inside to find Luis tied to a chair, eyes widening with relief and surprise. Mr. Carter. Qu'est ce? We're not out yet. He cut Luis free and handed him the guard's pistol. You remember what I taught you? Yes, sir. Good. Follow the chalk marks. Stay low. If you hear shooting, you run and don't look back. What about you? I'll be right behind you. They moved toward the stairs when an alarm shrieked through the building. Not because of Ezekiel's infiltration, but from outside. Through a broken window, they could see muzzle flashes in the darkness. The cartel was fighting itself. Valdez had made his move. His men were engaging Raphael's loyalists in a vicious firefight across the cannery yard. Bodies dropped on both sides as years of suppressed rivalries exploded into violence. Now, Ezekiel urged, pushing Luis toward the maintenance tunnel. They descended into darkness, following the chalk arrows. Behind them, boots thundered on metal as more guards responded to the alarm. The tunnel was narrow, forcing them to move single file. Luis led, Ezekiel covering their rear. A figure appeared at the tunnel entrance above. Nico, Raphael's lieutenant, who'd contacted them earlier. For a moment, nobody moved. Go, Nico said quietly, then fired his weapon into the wall, shouting, they went the other way. North exit. The deception bought them precious seconds. They emerged from the tunnel into the chaos of the yard. Cartel members were shooting at each other. Vehicles burned, and somewhere in the darkness, Sheriff Daniels was laying down, covering fire from his concealed position. This way, Ezekiel guided Luis toward a gap in the fence he'd identified earlier. They almost made it. Then Valdez appeared, blood streaming from a scalp wound, his pistol trained on them. The old soldier and the boy. You started all this. No, Ezekiel Carter. You started it when you fed Raphael false information about my ranch. Valdez's eyes narrowed. How did you? You wanted him dead. Wanted to take over. You just didn't expect him to fail against one old man. For a moment, Valdez seemed to consider shooting them anyway. Then a burst of automatic fire stitched across the ground near his feet. Sheriff Daniels, shooting from his hidden position, had given them their chance. Ezekiel and Luis ran into the darkness as the cannery burned behind them. They didn't stop until they reached the tree line, where Angela waited with the truck, engine running. Get in, both of you. They dove into the vehicle as she floored it, tires spinning on the dirt road. Behind them, the night sky glowed orange from fires at the cannery. The radio crackled with panicked cartel communications. Raphael screaming for order as his organization tore itself apart. Where are we going? Luis asked, still clutching the pistol with white knuckles. Sheriff's Station, Angela replied. Tom called. State police are 30 minutes out, FBI an hour behind them. It's over. Luis sounded like he couldn't quite believe it. Almost, Ezekiel said, watching their mirrors for pursuit. They pulled into the sheriff's station to find it surrounded by state police vehicles, their lights painting everything in reds and blues. Federal agents were already processing some captured cartel members, including a wounded Raphael who'd been abandoned by his own men when Valdez's coup failed. A state police captain approached their truck. Mr. Carter? I'm Captain Rodriguez. We need statements from all of you. The boy needs medical attention first, Ezekiel said firmly. Infine, Luis protested. You're in shock. Angela, go with him. Make sure he gets checked out properly. As the medics led Luis away, Angela turned back to her father. What about you? I need to file a report. Lots of reports. She hugged him suddenly, fiercely. Mom would have been proud of you. She would have been proud of you too. You fought when it mattered. Angela pulled back, tears in her eyes. "We survived. We did more than that. We stood our ground. The federal processing took hours." Ezekiel gave his statement with military precision, leaving nothing out. Angela provided her recordings and documentation, building a case that would destroy what remained of the cartel's presence in Millbrook County. Luis's mother arrived just after midnight, having driven from Houston in a panic after getting a call from the sheriff. She alternated between hugging her son and scolding him in rapid Spanish. But when she saw Ezekiel, she stopped. "You saved him." "He saved himself, ma'am. I just helped a little." Maria Mendez looked at this old farmer who'd stood against an army for her boy, and something passed between them. An understanding that some debts couldn't be repaid, only acknowledged. Dawn was breaking when Ezekiel finally returned to his ranch. The damage was extensive. Bullet holes everywhere, the barn destroyed, the western wall of the house partially collapsed, but still stood, scarred and damaged, but standing. Angela found him on the porch, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise. The FBI says it'll take months to sort out all the evidence. Trials could go on for years. That's your world, not mine. They want you to testify. I will. Once. Then I'm done. She sat beside him, and they watched the sun paint the damaged ranch in gold and amber. It would take time to rebuild, but that was okay. Ezekiel had time now. "I've been thinking," Angela said slowly. "Maybe I could stay for a while. Help with the repairs. Take some time off from the prosecutor's office. I'd like that." A truck pulled up the drive. Luis jumped out, his mother following more slowly. The boy ran up to the porch, something in his hands. "Mr. Carter, I found this in the rubble." He held out the photograph from Ezekiel's Marine unit, slightly singed but intact. "Thought you'd want it back." Ezekiel took the photo, looking at those young faces from so long ago. His brothers in arms, most gone now, but their memory enduring. He'd fought one more battle, won one more victory, not for glory or country this time, but for home, for family, for a boy who reminded him why some fights were worth having. "Thank you, son." Luis beamed, then grew serious. "Mr. Carter, when I'm old enough, I want to be like you. A Marine." "No," Ezekiel said gently. "Be better than me. Be the man who doesn't need to fight because he's strong enough to build peace." Sheriff Daniels arrived later that morning, his arm in a sling from a grazing wound he'd taken during the cannery fight. "Thought you should know. Final count is 15 cartel members in custody, 7 confirmed dead from their internal fighting, and the rest scattered to the wind. Rafael, singing like a canary, trying to make a deal. Valdez too, what's left of him. They're racing to see who can give up the most information. And Nico, the one who helped us. Witness protection. He's already gone." Tom looked around at the damaged ranch. "Hell of a thing you did here, Ezekiel. 3 days against an army. I had help. Still, most men would have run." Ezekiel shook his head. A Marine doesn't retreat. He advances in a different direction. This time, that direction was straight through them. As the sheriff left and the morning wore on, people began arriving. Neighbors with tools and lumber. The feed store owner with supplies. The grocery store lady with casseroles. Even some of the deputies who'd been too scared to help during the siege came to offer their labor in rebuilding. The town had been freed from its fear, and they knew who to thank. 3 days had passed since the cannery raid, and Ezekiel thought the worst was behind them. He was wrong. Rafael Morales sat in federal custody, but his rage had only intensified. Through a corrupted guard and a smuggled phone, he'd made one last call to his remaining loyalists. "Burn it all," he'd ordered. The old man, his family, the whole ranch. "I want nothing left but ashes." The convoy that approached Carter Ranch at dusk was different from previous attacks. No subtlety, no tactics, just raw destructive intent. Raphael's most violent enforcers, the ones who'd escaped the cannery massacre, had returned with military-grade weapons and nothing left to lose. Leading them was Raphael himself, having killed 2 federal marshals during his escape an hour earlier. Ezekiel spotted the dust cloud first, his old soldier's instincts prickling. He was checking the damaged fence line when he saw vehicles approaching fast, too fast for a social visit. "Angela, Luis." He ran toward the house where they'd been sorting through salvageable items. The lead truck smashed through the front gate, sending splintered wood flying. A heavy machine gun mounted in the truck bed opened fire, stitching bullets across the house's facade. Windows exploded, walls splintered, and the air filled with the deadly hornet's song of passing rounds. Down! Everyone down! Ezekiel shoved Luis behind the overturned kitchen table as Angela dove for cover. This wasn't a siege or a raid. This was annihilation. They're not trying to take anything, Angela gasped, recognizing the pattern. They just want us dead. Raphael's voice boomed from a loudspeaker, but gone was the controlled tone from before. This was pure rage. You cost me everything, old man. My organization, my respect, my future. Now I take everything from you. The machine gun continued its deadly sweep, turning the front of the house into Swiss cheese. Ezekiel knew they couldn't stay here. The walls wouldn't hold much longer. The storm cellar, he ordered. Move! They scrambled through the house as it disintegrated around them. Pictures fell from walls. Martha's china shattered in the cabinet. Decades of memories turned to debris in seconds. They reached the reinforced storm cellar just as an RPG round hit the living room, turning it into an inferno. In the cellar, Ezekiel grabbed the emergency supplies he'd stashed. Extra ammunition, his remaining weapons, and something he'd hoped never to use again, a case of Claymore mines from his military days, kept illegally but carefully maintained. Dad, what are those? Last resort insurance. He checked his rifle, did the math. 23 rounds left for the Winchester, 2 magazines for the Colt, 6 shells for the shotgun. Against at least a dozen attackers with automatic weapons and explosives. Luis was praying quietly in Spanish, his mother's rosary clutched in his hands. The boy had been brave through everything, but this felt different. This felt final. Hey, Ezekiel said gently, we're not done yet. There's too many of them. There always were. Didn't stop us before. Angela's phone buzzed. A text from Sheriff Daniels. State police mobilizing. 20 minutes out. Hold on. 20 minutes might as well have been 20 hours. The house above them was already burning, smoke seeping through the cellar doors. They'd have to move soon or suffocate. I'm going up, Ezekiel announced. Create a distraction, buy us time. That's suicide, Angela protested. No, suicide is staying here and burning to death. He handed her the shotgun. When you hear the claymores detonate, you and Luis run for the eastern tree line. Don't stop, don't look back. Dad, Angela, I need you to promise me something. Whatever happens, you make sure Luis gets out. He's got his whole life ahead of him. We all do. Ezekiel smiled sadly. I've had my life. Had a good woman who loved me. Raised a daughter who makes me proud. Fought for things that mattered. If this is where it ends, I can accept that. But not for you too. Before she could argue further, he was moving. Up through the cellar's emergency exit. Out into the smoke-filled chaos of his burning home. The heat was overwhelming, but he'd operated in worse conditions. In Fallujah, when white phosphorus had turned buildings into ovens. In Somalia, when the streets literally melted in the heat. He moved to his pre-positioned fighting position behind the stone well, one of the few structures that could stop heavy rounds. The attackers had spread out, surrounding the property, cutting off escape routes. Professional deployment. These weren't street thugs anymore. Raphael stood behind his technical truck, the mounted gun still chattering. When he saw Ezekiel emerge from the smoke, his scarred face twisted with satisfaction. There he is, the great Marine, come to die like a soldier. Ezekiel's response was measured, tactical. He put a round through the truck's radiator, then another through the gunner's shoulder. Non-lethal, but disabling. The machine gun went silent as the wounded man fell into the truck bed. Return fire erupted from multiple positions. Ezekiel displaced, moving through smoke and shadow. Every shot he took had a count. Every movement had to have purpose. This was the economy of violence, where ammunition was life and mistakes were death. A figure rushed his position from the left. Ezekiel pivoted, firing from the hip. The attacker tumbled into the dirt. Another came from the right, and the Winchester spoke again. But he was being flanked, surrounded. Too many angles to cover. That's when he heard engines approaching from the main road. Not state police sirens, but something else. Through the smoke, headlights appeared. 3, 4, 5 vehicles. More cartel reinforcements? Ezekiel's heart sank. But the men who emerged weren't cartel. They were townspeople. Tom Morrison from the neighboring ranch, carrying his grandfather's M1 Garand. Earl from a feed store with a hunting rifle. Mary Patterson clutching a pistol she barely knew how to use. Even some of Sheriff Daniels' off-duty deputies, the ones who'd found their courage. Nobody burns out our neighbors. Morrison shouted, taking cover behind his truck and opening fire on the cartel positions. The battlefield shifted. What had been a one-sided execution became a chaotic melee. The cartel fighters, expecting to overwhelm one old man, found themselves caught between defenders. Crossfire turned their positions into death traps. Angela and Luis emerged from the cellar, adding their fire to the defense. Luis had grabbed one of the fallen attacker's rifles, handling it with the competence Ezekiel had taught him. Angela worked the shotgun, keeping attackers away from their position. Raphael watched his final assault falling apart. His men were taking casualties, falling back, some throwing down weapons and running. The burning ranch had become a magnet, drawing the entire community to its defense. "No!" Raphael screamed. "We finished this." He grabbed an assault rifle and charged toward Ezekiel's position, firing wildly. Bullets sparked off the stone well, driving Ezekiel down. Raphael reached the well's far side, weapon raised for the killing shot. The rifle clicked empty. In that moment of silence between warriors, Ezekiel rose with the Colt in his hand. Both men stood there, 5 feet apart, one armed and one not. "Do it," Raphael snarled. "Kill me like you killed my men." "I didn't kill your men," Ezekiel replied calmly. "You did. Every choice you made led here. Every act of violence created this moment. Philosophical bullshit from a killer. Maybe, but I know the difference between a necessary fight and a chosen one. You chose this." Sheriff Daniels' voice crackled over a loudspeaker. "State police are 2 minutes out. Federal marshals are en route. Anyone still holding a weapon when they arrive will be considered hostile." Raphael laughed bitterly. 2 minutes. I could do a lot of damage in 2 minutes. You could, or you could surrender. Go to prison. Live. That's not living. Ask your men if they agree. Raphael looked around. His remaining fighters had already dropped their weapons, hands raised. The townspeople had them surrounded, and in the distance, sirens wailed their approach. It was over. "You should have killed me when you had the chance," Raphael said. "I don't bury problems," Ezekiel replied, echoing his earlier words. "I exposed them. You're exposed now. Everyone sees what you are." Raphael's face contorted with rage, and for a moment, Ezekiel thought he might charge anyway, suicide by marine. But then his shoulders slumped. The fight went out of him like air from a punctured tire. He dropped to his knees, hands behind his head. State police vehicles roared onto the property, officers in tactical gear swarming out. Federal marshals followed, taking Raphael into custody with extreme prejudice. They weren't gentle, not after he'd killed 2 of their own. As Raphael was dragged away, he looked back at Ezekiel one last time. "This isn't over." "Yes," Ezekiel said quietly. "It is." The ranch looked like a war zone because that's what it had been. The house stood, but barely. Half the roof had collapsed, walls were riddled with bullets, and smoke damage touched everything. The barn was gone, just blackened timbers and memory. The land itself bore scars, trenches, burns, the debris of violence. Sheriff Tom Daniels stood with Ezekiel amid the destruction, his arms still in a sling, but his badge polished bright. The corruption in his department had been exposed, 3 deputies arrested, and Tom had somehow emerged with his integrity intact, if bruised. "Insurance company is calling it an act of terrorism," Tom said. "Means they won't pay out." Figured as much. There's talk of a federal disaster relief fund, but that could take months, maybe years. Ezekiel nodded, unsurprised. He'd learned long ago that the government was quick to create veterans but slow to support them. Angela emerged from what remained of the house, carrying a box of salvaged items. Her expensive Dallas clothes were replaced with jeans and work boots. her manicured nails broken from sorting through debris. The good news is, my office is so impressed with the case file that they're fast-tracking a RICO prosecution against the entire cartel network. The bad news is, they want me leading it, which means relocating to Dallas full-time for at least 2 years. That's your career, Ezekiel said. What you work for? It is. She set down the box, looking at the ruined ranch. But I've been thinking about what's important. Career or family. Cases or connections. Don't make decisions based on guilt or obligation. I'm not. I'm making them based on what I learned here. That some things are worth fighting for, and some fights are worth having together. Before Ezekiel could respond, vehicles began arriving. Not official ones this time, but pickup trucks and vans, cars and trailers. The people of Millbrook County had come to Carter Ranch, and they hadn't come empty-handed. Tom Morrison's truck carried lumber. Earl's van held tools and supplies. Mary Patterson had organized the church ladies, who arrived with enough food to feed an army. Even people Ezekiel barely knew showed up with hammers, saws, and willing hands. "What's all this?" Ezekiel asked Morrison. "Barn raising," the rancher replied simply. "Old school. Community comes together, builds it in a day. Least we can do for the man who stood between us and the cartel. I didn't do it for recognition. We know. That's why we're here." Luis arrived with his mother, both carrying tools. The boy had changed in the days since the siege. Taller somehow, or maybe just standing straighter. The childhood was gone from his eyes, replaced with something steadier. "Mr. Carter, where do you want us to start?" "The barn frame. We'll need to clear the old foundation first." As the community worked, the story emerged in pieces. The FBI had used Angela's evidence to roll up cartel operations across 3 states. 37 arrests and counting. Rafael would never see freedom again, multiple life sentences guaranteed. Valdez had been found dead in his cell, suspicious circumstances that nobody seemed eager to investigate. By noon, the skeleton of a new barn was rising. People who'd barely spoken in years worked side by side. Old grudges were set aside in the face of shared purpose. The ranch was becoming not just rebuilt, but reimagined. Angela worked alongside the others, learning to swing a hammer from Morrison, proper nail placement from Earl. She laughed when she hit her thumb, cursed creatively when a board wouldn't fit, and slowly found rhythm in the physical labor. "You're staying," Ezekiel observed during a water break. "I called my office. Told them I'd handle the case remotely. Video conferences, digital filings. Welcome to the 21st century, Dad. And when the case is over, there's always another case. But there's only one home." Sheriff Daniels approached with a manila envelope. "This came in my office. Thought you should see it." Inside was a deed transfer. The abandoned Riverside Bar property, 20 acres including water rights. The owner had fled the country, and the property had been seized as drug proceeds. A sticky note was attached, "For Luis Mendez, when he turns 18. Courtesy of friend. Nico," Ezekiel murmured. The lieutenant who'd helped them had found a way to give back. He found Luis helping to raise a corner post. "Son, come here a minute." He showed Luis the deed. The boy's eyes widened as he read it. This is for me. When you're of age, it's yours to build something good on. Maybe that future you were dreaming about." Luis hugged him suddenly, fiercely. "Thank you. For everything. For teaching me to fight. For showing me when not to. That's the most important lesson," Ezekiel said, knowing the difference. As the sun began to set, the barn stood complete. Not pretty, not perfect, but solid and true. The house would take longer, but temporary repairs made it livable. The ranch would survive. That evening, the community gathered for a meal on the grounds. Tables made from sawhorses and plywood groaned under casseroles and pies. Children played where gunfights had raged days before. Life was reclaiming the space from violence. Ezekiel stood apart for a moment, watching it all. Angela found him there, 2 beers in hand. "Mom would have loved this," she said, handing him one. She always said the ranch would bring people together. Just took longer than expected. And a war. Sometimes that's what it takes to remind people what matters. They stood in comfortable silence, watching Luis teach some younger kids basic self-defense moves, his mother watching with a mixture of pride and worry. I've been thinking about something, Angela said. You spend your whole life fighting other people's wars. Military service, classified operations, things you still can't talk about. Then you came here to find peace, and the war followed you home. It did. But this time, you weren't fighting for abstract concepts. Not for country or duty or orders. You were fighting for home, for family, for that boy over there who needed a father figure. For me, even though I'd been too stubborn to visit for 2 years. I'd do it again. I know. That's what I finally understood. All those missed birthdays, school plays, graduations. You weren't absent because you didn't care. You were absent because you were standing guard. You were always standing guard. Ezekiel turned to his daughter, seeing Martha's strength in her eyes. I could have done better. Should have found a balance. Maybe. But you did what you thought was right with the information you had. That's all anyone can do. Sheriff Daniels climbed onto a makeshift platform, raising his beer. I'd like to propose a toast to Ezekiel Carter, who reminded us that one person can make a stand. To Angela Carter, who proved that courage runs in families. To Luis Mendez, who showed us that the next generation might be stronger than we thought. And to all of you who came when it mattered. The crowd raised their drinks, voices mixing in appreciation. But Ezekiel raised his hand for silence. If we're toasting, let's toast to the right things. To the rule of law that eventually prevailed. To the community that stands together. To the young people who'll build something better on the foundations we leave. And to those no longer with us, who taught us that some things are worth defending. He raised his beer toward the house, where Martha's photograph still hung on the one undamaged wall. To absent friends and present family. Absent friends and present family, the crowd echoed. As the gathering continued into the night, Luis approached with an envelope. Mr. Carter, this came in the mail yesterday. I wasn't sure when to give it to you. The return address was Arlington, Virginia. Inside, a letter on official Marine Corps stationery. Lieutenant Colonel Carter, we have been following the events in Millbrook County with great interest. Your actions upheld the highest traditions of the Marine Corps. While we cannot officially condone all methods employed, we recognize that you defended American citizens against a clear and present danger. Enclosed, please find information about the Marine Corps Emergency Relief Fund, which has approved a grant for the reconstruction of your property. Additionally, several of your former unit members have established a private fund to assist with immediate needs. You may have retired from active service, but you never stopped being a Marine. Your brothers remember. Semper Fidelis. Attached was a check that would cover most of the rebuilding costs. Good news, Luis asked. The best kind, Ezekiel replied. The kind that reminds you that you're never really alone. As the evening wound down and people began departing, each stopping to shake Ezekiel's hand or hug Angela, the ranch settled into peaceful quiet. The new barn stood solid against the stars. The house, wounded but standing, sheltered 3 generations of struggle and survival. Louis sat on the new porch steps they'd built that day, his mother beside him. Mr. Carter, that letter you got, was it about the Marines? In a way. I've been thinking about what you said, about being strong enough to build peace instead of just fighting. Maybe I could do both? Join the Marines, learn what you learned, then come back and help rebuild places like this. Ezekiel sat beside the boy, remembering himself at that age, full of purpose and possibility. That's a worthy goal. The Corps will teach you to fight. But remember, the most important battles are the ones you prevent. Will you help me prepare? Train me, if your mother agrees. Maria sighed. I lost his father to violence. I don't want to lose my son to it. You won't, Ezekiel assured her. I'll teach him to be smart, not just brave. To lead, not just follow. To come home when the fighting's done. Then yes. God help me, yes. As the last visitors departed and quiet returned to Carter Ranch, Ezekiel walked his property one more time. The scars remained bullet holes in fence posts, burned patches of earth, the old barn's foundation stones. But new growth was already beginning. Green shoots pushing through burned soil. Fresh lumber rising where old had fallen. Angela joined him, linking her arm through his. So what now? Now we rebuild. Properly this time. Make it better than it was. And the nightmares? The memories? This kind of violence leaves marks. It does. But we'll face them together. That's what family does. In the distance, a coyote howled, but it was just a coyote. No hidden threats, no watching enemies. Just the natural sound of Texas night. For the first time in weeks, Ezekiel allowed himself to truly relax. The war was over. The ranch had held. His family was safe. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, trials to testify at, trauma to process, a life to rebuild. But tonight, standing with his daughter under familiar stars, watching Luis help his mother to their car, Ezekiel felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Peace. Real peace. The kind earned through sacrifice, secured through strength, and maintained through community. The kind that made all the fighting worthwhile. As they walked back to the damaged but standing house, Angela asked, "Any regrets?" Ezekiel thought of Martha, of missed moments, of choices made in duty's shadow. Then he looked at what remained, a daughter who'd found her strength, a boy who'd discovered his courage, a community that had remembered its bonds. "No," he said finally. "No regrets. Just lessons learned and battles won." The door closed behind them, lamplight warming windows that would be replaced tomorrow. On the wall, Martha's photograph smiled down, and beside it now hung 3 new frames. Angela at the defense of the ranch, Luis standing proud with his deed, and the community raising the barn. The story of Carter Ranch would be told for generations in Millbrook County. How one old Marine stood against an army. How a daughter found her father and herself in the crucible of violence. How a boy chose courage over fear. How a community remembered that standing together was the only way to stand at all. But for Ezekiel, Angela, and Luis, it was simpler than legend. It was just home, scarred but standing, tested but triumphant. Home. Would you have the courage to stand your ground if danger came knocking at your door? If this story gripped you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories.